Thank you so much for joining us today for Session 2 of Building for the Future, Investing in Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation in Schools. I'm Christy Whitman, and I co-chair K12 Climate Action of the Aspen Institute with Secretary John King, to whom I will turn shortly. With K12 Climate Action, we're working to develop an action plan to support our education sector in contributing to climate solutions. This means reducing the footprint of our education sector and teaching about climate change in schools. In our first session, we had the opportunity to highlight ways we can invest in our school buildings and grounds to transition schools to clean energy and increase access to green schoolyards. Today, we will have the opportunity to discuss an issue I previously worked on at the EPA, transitioning our largely diesel school bus fleet to electric. With about 480,000 mostly diesel school buses, our schools operate the largest mass transit fleet in the country. I will now turn to Secretary King.
Thank you, Governor. Not only do these buses contribute to climate change with their emissions, they also harm students' health. These health impacts are worse for communities of color, where students of color experience disproportionately higher rates of asthma. And this impacts student health and learning. I can recall as a principal and teacher, students who miss multiple days of school because of severe asthma, undermining their education and their long-term prospects for success. We will hear more today about the urgency and opportunity to transition our school bus fleet to electric and highlight districts currently working toward this transition. We are thankful for our partnership with the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, the Sierra Club, and the World Resources Institute to bring together this conversation today. We are also thankful to you for joining us to learn more about how school infrastructure can help make our schools models for sustainability and prepare children and youth for the future. We're excited that we will now hear from Secretary Miguel Cardona and EPA Administrator Michael Regan.
Thank you to Governor Whitman and Secretary King for kicking off Session 2 of Building for the Future. I am Princess Moss, Vice President of the National Education Association. We are proud members of the K12 Climate Action Coalition.
And I'm Randy Weingarten, the President of the American Federation of Teachers and a Commissioner with the K12 Climate Action. And we are really glad to be joined today by Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, and by EPA Administrator Michael Regan. They are both proud products of the American public school systems and wholly committed to ensuring that all of our students have everything they need to access the opportunities to thrive, from clean air to clean water and learning options that unite passion with purpose. And so Princess and I are going to share the obligations of asking these two great public servants questions, and I get to start. And so I'm going to ask both Secretary Cardona and Administrator Regan the same question, and that's about President Biden's great approach to climate. He's emphasized the need for a whole of government and a whole of society approach to addressing climate change. So how can we rethink how our public schools can be part of that climate solution?
Thank you, President Randy Weingarten, and glad to be with you and the others, and especially happy to be with my colleague, Michael Regan over there at the EPA. You know, we know that this whole of government approach matters. It's critically important, and we look forward to continuing to work in partnership on issues of importance for our entire country. So when we're talking about this, who better than our students to engage in this process? They're, and our educators, knowing that they're at the front line of this. And our students are the next leaders in climate sustainability. So let's get them involved early and make sure we prepare our students with a well-rounded education that helps them be prepared to provide the innovative solutions that we're going to need, not only now, but into the future.
Well, and this is, you know, the president's wisdom of the whole of government approach is really awesome, from EPA to Department of Education. it gives me that much more of an incentive to partner with my good friend, Miguel Cardona. First, schools, have a large role. They have a large carbon footprint. They're among the biggest energy consumers because it takes a lot of energy to heat and cool buildings, to keep the lights on, to feed millions of students every day. So, we want schools to be involved because they are a player. By being more energy efficient, schools can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make our places of learning healthier. But second, incorporating climate literacy into the classroom is another critical area. We want our teachers to have the resources they need to create a curriculum that includes climate science. The classroom is an essential place to begin to nurture curiosity, to challenge and inspire our students. And so we want to foster that understanding of the natural world. And at EPA, we're looking at ways we can partner with Secretary Cardona's team to strengthen climate literacy and reduce that carbon footprint.
Thank you for those responses. We're going to go to the next question, and the next question goes to Secretary Cardona. Secretary Cardona, as an educator, a principal, a state leader, and now as the Secretary of Education, you've seen a wide array of school buildings. Can you tell us about the current condition of public school buildings and grounds and what impact that has on students and educators? And what do you think can be done to help us build healthy, sustainable learning environments?
Thanks for the question. Recently the Government Accountability Office noted that 54% of our school buildings need to replace a major system in it. So I think that's a good indicator of the work that we need to do. And I just recently wrapped up a Help Us Here tour, and I visited, I think it was like 9 different states and DC, 10 different buildings. And what a variance in what I saw. We had some very new buildings, good, conducive to learning. And then we had other buildings that had, you could tell the systems haven't been touched in years. As a matter of fact, the reopening efforts across the country were influenced by a school building's ability to have good, proper ventilation. As Administrator Regan said, the buildings need to be safe for students and for staff, but also buildings that are not kept well are not as welcoming for families and for students. So I've seen a lot of variety, and I know that unfortunately in less resource districts, less resource communities, the communities that were most impacted by the pandemic, those are the places where we see older rundown buildings. So this is not only important for our students, but it's an issue of equity for me in terms of making sure that all students have a safe learning environment where the air is circulated well and it's conducive to learning in a welcoming environment.
Thank you, Secretary. And I get one more time to ask both of you a question. And that's about buses and public transportation. And we know that when I talk about the American public school system, I'm really talking about many, 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 many public school systems around the country. But if you add them all together, they have one of the largest public transportation fleets in the country. So we've talked a lot about electrifying that fleet. And how would we go about doing this in a way that's expedient and efficient? And let me start with Administrator Regan first.
Well, thank you for that question. A great question. Since around 2008, EPA has managed the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grant program, which provides funding for state and local governments and other eligible applicants to replace older diesel vehicles and engines with cleaner technology. In addition to our grant program, we also have a school rebate program each year that specifically supports rebates for new cleaner buses. This year, we awarded $10.5 million to clean up over 470 school buses across 40 states. And a major barrier to electrifying our nation's school bus fleet is the upfront cost. Electric school buses can be upwards of 3 times more expensive than a new diesel bus. So federal funding programs like Clean Buses for Kids program, for example, proposed in the American Jobs Plan, can build off the successes and experiences of EPA to help alleviate that financial strain and make electric school buses more accessible up front?
What I would say is, I'm excited to work with Administrator Regan and EPA to see how we can encourage the growth of electric vehicles, especially those school buses that we know are critically important. But we have to lead by example in education. And I look forward to working with him to encourage as many as possible and move in that direction. That we know it's good for our community, and it's a great way to model what we want to see across the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question, and this one is to both of you, Secretary Cardona and Administrator Regan. We know that communities of color are disproportionately affected, excuse me, by the negative impacts of climate change. And President Biden has committed to ensuring that 40% of federal investments for climate action will benefit marginalized communities. How can investments in school infrastructure and transportation be used to advance equity?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it is an issue of equity. We've seen more affluent communities be able to keep up their buildings much better over the last several decades than communities that are under-resourced. So now you add a pandemic on top of things, and air quality and ventilation systems in schools are critical parts of safely reopening. So we saw the impact of that in larger communities that have older facilities having to take additional steps or being delayed in their ability to reopen schools. And we know there's no substitute for in-person learning. So basically what ended up happening is gaps were exacerbated. Opportunities for education were exacerbated. So I applaud the president for being bold and saying, we need to make sure we're focusing on this. And that's the only way we're going to get to a point where we're better off than where we were prior to the pandemic. That's why legislation like Chairman Scott's Reopen and Rebuild America Schools Act that targets funding to schools in low-income neighborhood helps put students of color at equal footing in terms of getting access to buildings that are safe and conducive to learning.
And Secretary Cardona is exactly right. We have to ensure that all of our children, regardless of the color of their skin, their economic background, their zip codes, have a safe, healthy place to learn. But we know far too many of our schools that serve students of color and students of lower income households struggle to adequately maintain and upgrade their buildings. As the Secretary just mentioned, COVID-19 has highlighted and accelerated the need for ventilation systems and indoor air quality improvements in schools as they reopen, especially those located in low-income communities. EPA's Indoor Air Quality Tools for Schools program provides guidance to schools, particularly to underserved school districts, on how to effectively manage ventilation, maintenance, sanitation, and other indoor air quality issues. But it also addresses the broad range of pollutants and building issues that contribute to poor indoor air quality, from mold to asthma triggers, and equips schools and school districts to put sustainable air quality management plans in practice and in place. Transportation, as we mentioned earlier, is another example. 25 million children in the United States take a bus to school every day. Diesel exhaust from those school buses are bound to have a negative impact on human health, especially our children. And so we have a deep experience in replacing school buses with cleaner vehicles. And we're really excited about the American Jobs Plan and the desire to replace 20% of yellow school buses with electric vehicles.
Secretary Cardona, you and I both love career tech ed. Yeah. And President Biden has pointed out that addressing the climate crisis is going to require us creating new jobs of today and tomorrow. And many of these new jobs are going to be in new sectors that we haven't traditionally talked about in the school curriculum. So how do we take this moment with the investment from the American Rescue Plan to rethink some of these pathways to prepare kids for the future?
That's it. We have to rethink. I use the word evolve. We have to evolve quicker. The jobs are there. The infrastructure plan supports it. So as a school system, we have to make sure we're providing students with clear pathways to jobs that exist today, with creative and innovative partnerships with our partners in the workforce that are going to help our students find positions. And we have to invest in supporting our teachers and the professional learning that's going to be needed to have a better understanding of what these jobs are. It's an exciting opportunity, really, to really think about reimagining career pathways. I always say CCR 2.0, right? We have to make sure that we're giving students an opportunity, not only for four-year colleges, but also two-year programs and credentialing programs. The jobs exist, and it's on us now to make sure that we evolve the system to meet those demands. I'm excited about that opportunity.
Great. Your excitement makes us excited as well. I have one last question, and this is to both Secretary Cardona and Administrator Regan. As we know, there are many students who are already leaders in movements for climate action. Throughout the K12 Climate Action listening sessions, those of us at the NEA were captivated and inspired by the students leading it in this work. How can student voices be incorporated into decisions about sustainable school infrastructure investments? And what role can our youth play in advocating for climate action in their schools?
Well, listen, our youth have already been tremendously impactful in grabbing the attention of world leaders on addressing climate change. We're at this moment where climate action is front and center, in large part because of the courageous actions of our students who are using their voices to demand a healthier, more sustainable future. So young people are already using their moral authority to lead change in their communities. And we want to encourage that and see it continue to grow. I met with youth activists last month, and I must say their command on the issue, their passion, their confidence, that's exactly what we need at this moment. We need for them to continue to remain active in their communities, talk to their parents, their teachers, and friends about these important issues. We're also exploring ways to strengthen climate literacy, both in and out of the classroom, because we know how important it is for young people to grasp the science of climate change, understand how it relates to public health, but more importantly, see themselves as a part of the solution. So this is another exciting area where EPA and the Department of Education will work together to strengthen those efforts, because our youth have such an important role to play in creating a healthier, more sustainable future. And we are more than elated to support them in that endeavor.
Yeah, so true. I just want to echo his comments. There hasn't been an issue in our country's history where our youth haven't been at the front line leading. And, you know, when it comes to this, I have a daughter who turns 15 tomorrow. She's the biggest climate justice advocate in the house. And she reminds me of what I can be doing to reduce my carbon footprint every day. So let me tell you, just sometimes what the adults have to do is listen, get out of the way, give them a platform, and make sure that they're a part of the conversation. And they'll push us, they'll innovate, they'll lead. I look forward to doing this with my colleague Reagan. And I know the last conversation we had, we were already talking about how we can get some electric school buses in DC and right around DC to make sure that we're leading that charge. I talked to my security team. I said it would be one thing if we walked around with an electric vehicle too, because we got to send a message. But our students are leading this work. We have to make sure we structure it, and it cannot just be a one and done. It has to be structured in how we do schooling. It has to be structured in how we reimagine education, give our students a voice on this important topic.
I can speak, I hope, for both Princess and myself. You know, we love to teach. And so to be able to ask both of you questions, it's pretty awesome for us. And we want to just thank you. Thank you, Secretary Cardona. Thank you, Administrator Regan, not just for your time and not just for your expertise and your devotion and your commitment to this work, but what you showed today is not just that the world is changing, but that this administration is seizing the opportunity to ensure that it changes for the good, to ensure there is a just transition, to ensure that kids have a voice in their future, and to ensure that public education is a part of this. We need a country where we have the jobs that commit to a sustainable future, and so that all our kids can drink clean water and breathe clean air. And thank you. I just want to thank you for modeling what we all need to do together with government, not only for a force of good, but really preparing for whole society and whole government change. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Well said, Randy. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both of you for your leadership and for modeling the behavior for all of our students and children. And I couldn't be any more excited to have a partner like Secretary Cardona, who is leading the way. I'm glad to be on his team.
Same here. That old adage, it takes a village. Really, all of us working together, we're going to get farther quicker. And I know Administrator Regan's leadership here is going to really help us make moves in the country. I look forward to working with him, supporting this work, and making sure that our students are in the process and their voices are heard, and making sure that our educators have the support that they need to help usher in this new era of climate sustainability. So thank you for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm excited to join this panel to talk about the transition of America's fleet of 480,000 mostly diesel school buses to clean electric buses. It's our biggest mass transit fleet and a huge opportunity. So we have a great panel. I'm joined by Catherine Garcia with the Sierra Club and the Electric School Bus Coalition, Andrew Brennan, who is a co-founder of Kentucky Student Voices and a National Geographic Fellow, Richard DiMatteo from Highland Electric, and Gilbert Rosas from the Stockton Unified School District. So it's a great panel, and I'm going to start just by asking everybody to say a little bit about your work to promote this transition that we're hoping to see. So Catherine, I'm going to start with you. You're part of the Electric School Bus Coalition, which has been working on this for several years. Can you talk a little bit about what you're up to?
Sure. Thank you, Dan. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this excellent panel today. I'm really excited for our conversation. So at the Sierra Club, which is a grassroots organization, I lead a campaign that aims to improve access to pollution-free vehicles to clean up our air, and especially for our youngest commuters. Every day I work on campaigns to spur the transition away from fossil fuel vehicles, and electric school buses are my biggest priority. Nearly 95% of America's school buses run on diesel, and that is unacceptable. We must protect our kids' lungs by keeping diesel fumes out of the air inside and outside of buses as they travel to school every day. So at the Sierra Club, we advocate for state and federal legislation that will electrify the school bus fleet. And we're working to make sure that school districts can replace their diesel buses with electric buses, and that they have access to charging infrastructure. We're also working to make sure that there are strong labor standards for bus manufacturing, assembly, and the entire supply chain. And I do that work also with the Electric School Bus Coalition, which consists of many organizations that are focused on health and labor and the environment. And this work is deeply personal to me because I am a mom to a 1-year-old, and I'm determined that by the time he is riding a bus to school, that it's on an electric school bus.
Awesome. Definitely hope that happens. By the way, I think I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Dan Lashoff, the U.S. Director at the World Resources Institute, and we are launching a major campaign to try to accelerate this transition and ensure that all 480,000 school buses are converted to electric by 2030. So with that, let me turn to Andrew. Andrew, co-founder of Kentucky Student Voices, National Geographic fellow, and I understand that the Kentucky Student Voice team is working to transition the school bus fleet in Kentucky. So tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Well, thank you for having me on this panel, Dan. And as you mentioned, we are in the earliest stages of asking questions about the impact that our mostly diesel school bus fleet has on academic achievement and student health alike. But I'm hoping I can speak a little bit to that today. Like you mentioned, my name is Andrew Brennan. I'm the co-founder of the Kentucky Student Voice team. The Kentucky Student Voice team works to position students across the state of Kentucky as education, research, advocacy, and policy making partners. And I'm also an education fellow with National Geographic, where I work to support youth-led movements and organizations all around the world. It's these two perspectives that led me to begin exploring the intersection of climate action and K12 education. And I was delighted to find that Kentucky, my home state, has at least been somewhat ahead of the curve. Folks like to make assumptions about Kentucky sometimes, but really all the way back in 2009, we were investing millions to transition over 100 of our school bus fleet from diesel to hybrid, with some of our most rural counties in the most eastern parts of the state taking the biggest advantage of the program. And it wasn't just about transitioning buses either. It was also about preparing students and providing them with hands-on experience and training when it came to hybrid school bus technology. However, like most of the country, our progress in Kentucky has been kind of slow. Still, 95% of our school buses are diesel powered. And so our organization and hopefully others soon are beginning to ask questions about how it is that we can begin to double down on addressing both the climate impact of our schools and also preparing students, particularly those in Appalachia and in our inner cities, to be leaders in the new green economy. So we still have a lot to learn on this issue, but we're hoping that students can be part of the conversation about how to improve our environment and our health moving forward in Kentucky.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. And certainly the student voice here is really critical to move this agenda along. So appreciate your work on that. Richard, let me turn to you next. Richard is with Highland Electric, a new company, but with big ambitions to help transition the electric school bus fleet.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So thank you very much for having us. Rich DiMatteo, I'm Executive Vice President at Highland Electric Transportation. We're a turnkey, comprehensive electric vehicle provider to fleet operators. We're focused on the U.S. school bus market today. We provide electric buses as a service, helping school districts mostly overcome the unique barriers to adopting EVs, such as high upfront cost and complexity.
Thanks, Richard, and certainly congratulations on winning the contract with Montgomery County. It's a model that we've been looking at very closely at WRI and hope will be replicated in many other parts of the country. There are other models as well, but that's certainly a really important one. So thanks for that. Now, Gil Rosas with Stockton Unified School District. I just love the way you are getting kids involved in promoting clean energy and clean transportation. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Thank you for having us here today. Well, we've got a student energy patrol that we're very proud of. In fact, the first one had fourth graders in it telling about energy conservation techniques and how to save money and electricity and be good stewards of the environment. And then also what we've done at Stockton now is that we've received a CARB grant that's through the California Climate Investments, and it was for almost $5 million. With that money, we've created an infrastructure project in our transportation yard because these are our first buses. And we've also parlayed what we've done with the CARB grant with other grants. So, putting together an EV fleet is a very difficult and multifaceted thing. You've got a lot of moving parts on it. And so you've got a lot of considerations between infrastructure costs, construction, also bus selection, charger selection, being able to do things right away. So there's just a whole bunch of things that have to go into it. But we've chosen to kind of move. The school district has made an emphasis of moving from energy conservation to now reducing our emissions and our carbon footprint. So we've got 3 grants, like I said, that we've been working with: CARB, the California Air Resources Board, the California Energy Commission, and then PG&E rebates with our local utility company. And so, we're very proud of the fact that in less than 11 months, in less than a year, we've gone from design to breaking ground to installing chargers to buses arriving then in April, or actually it was March 23rd. So we're very proud of that fact, and we're hoping that we can be a model or a footprint for everybody else out there. And we also think that we need to tell the story with our children, because it is the children who benefit directly every single day. Stockton's in a disadvantaged community, and so we really stress very importantly that a lot of these people need to have environmental justice. They need to be able to be safe in their environment with greenhouse gases going down and less emissions. And so we definitely want to talk about this because we're very proud of what we've accomplished.
It's great and amazing speed. But Gil, let me stay with you and ask you to talk a little bit more about what were the barriers you had to overcome to get that level of investment and move towards getting these buses in place, and then say a little bit more about the benefits you see the electric school buses that are starting to be delivered to your district for the kids and for the district.
Sure. So the obvious restrictions or constraint was definitely COVID. We executed our contract in May, and we had to get utility companies out. We were in lockdowns with COVID, and we had to get our design approved by the utility companies and also break ground. So we had to make sure that a lot of things were done ahead of time to make sure we hit a tight schedule. It's important to have somebody on your team like CTE, Center for Transportation and the Environment. Our grant partners are incredible. They put together the grant, and they do project management, and they do data collection, and they're incredible. The other is Sage Renewables. They work on our long-term and near-term energy strategy. The construction is probably the strongest piece, and that was done by Schneider Electric. They've worked with us before, and they're an incredible contractor. The other is Mobility House. That handles our charging station, and that handles all the charging management and LCFS credits and a whole bunch of things. So, we just look at the fact that emissions are reduced by getting this all done right away, and it is for our kids. So we're just really excited about the fact that we had the right team together to get this done quickly.
Great, thanks. Richard, let me come back to you. You talked a little bit about the contract with Montgomery County. Can you say a little bit more about the kind of financing that is needed and that goes into a plan that's ambitious like that, and what are the options available to school districts that really are interested in converting their fleets, but clearly, as you indicated, don't have spare budget to devote to it, so they want to think about ways they could do that in a way that does not take money away from teachers or other priorities in their district.
Sure. Good question. So Montgomery County is a 326 bus deployment, which takes place over 4 years. We step up from 25 buses at one depot this summer to deploying new buses pretty much at their replacement rate by 2024 at their 4 other depots. And the way we're doing it is Highland is investing in the charging stations and buses and all the infrastructure needed. And we handle all the logistics and cover that very large upfront cost to the tune of $100 million. And in exchange, we enter into a long-term sort of subscription agreement or contract with Montgomery County Public Schools. It's a 12-year term contract for each deployment. And over the course of those 12 years, Montgomery County Public Schools will continue to pay what they were paying for diesel buses. And Highland will use the difference between that contract price and the actual operating costs of EVs, which are significantly lower. Maintenance costs, repair costs are both lower. Fueling costs is about a third. Electricity is about a third of the cost of fueling a bus with diesel. And so we'll take those savings to repay our upfront investment, that $100 million. And in this way, this public-private partnership solves not only the barriers that districts face in terms of budget availability to electrify, but also we take on the risk that those operational savings will be there, such that districts don't have to bet on those themselves, such that, like you said, they have funding available for teachers and other education activities.
That's great. Catherine, let me turn back to you. Can you talk about the types of policies and efforts that can be put in place either at the local level, state level, federal level that can really help get school districts in a position to make this transition and achieve the benefits that we could see from electric buses?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. That's a great question. I'm pleased to say that this is a very important moment for advocates because the White House is making electric school buses such a priority. President Biden's infrastructure plan will support the transition away from polluting diesel school buses, and the administration has already included $20 billion in the plan. And in terms of the Electric School Bus Coalition and Sierra Club, we are advocating for more money to be allocated towards electric school buses. In this Electric School Bus Coalition, which brings together advocates from equity, labor, clean energy, and environmental organizations, we leverage our members and allies to convey the urgency for adopting electric school buses. We currently are advocating to pass the Clean Commute for Kids Act, which is in Congress, and would invest $25 billion to help school districts upgrade to electric school bus fleets. One thing to point out is that we advocate that investment programs should be tailored to prioritize low-income communities of color who often bear the highest pollution burden and the worst air quality. Across the board nationwide, asthma rates for Black and Latinx children are higher than their white counterparts, and residents in communities of color should be consulted and included in decision-making processes as sites and fleet choices are selected. I also collaborate with Sierra Club's Ready for 100 campaign, which really works at the local level. It mobilizes cities and school districts to access bold, clean energy solutions. And this campaign helps school districts pass resolutions to phase out all fossil fuels and transition to electric school buses. We have organizers and advocates across the country that are working on passing these resolutions. Just last year, San Isidro District in San Diego passed a resolution to fully transition to zero-emission buses. And this is really important commitment because of the poor air quality at the US-Mexico border. And also this year, Seattle Public School District passed a resolution committing to phase out all fossil fuels by 2040, and that includes transportation. And that's a huge step because the district uses 400 school buses. So I'll stop there. That's a couple of examples that I want to highlight, but there is incredible momentum across the country, both at the local level and at the federal level.
Yeah, this seems like a really critical moment with the push from the White House. Vice President Harris visited an electric school bus maker recently, and with two of the newest senators sponsoring the Clean Commute for Kids Act, Senator Padilla and Senator Warnock, it seems like there's a lot of momentum. And if I just one follow-up, if I'm correct, I think the Clean Commute for Kids Act does include language to prioritize low-income and communities of color for investment in electric transportation. Is that right?
Yes, it does. And equity is extremely important in that particular policy. And that's part of the reason why we're advocating for it. And definitely, right now, we're actually trying to get more co-sponsors for that bill and definitely want to see it pass the finish line.
Great, thank you. Okay, Andrew, back to you. What more can students do? How can they get involved and help move this whole process forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank Catherine for the work that she's doing to push forward this legislation at the federal level. I think it's so important. I think there's a few different things. First of all, I think awareness is very important. Many young people are already aware about the climate crisis that we're facing, but many young people, like frankly, many adults, don't really know the impact that school buses and diesel school buses have in contributing to that crisis. And so I think providing information and raising awareness among youth activists and advocates about this issue is a really good, important first step. And, you know, as an education fellow with National Geographic, you know, I've really worked with and had the privilege to be able to support young people who are leading really thoughtful research and advocacy and storytelling efforts. But I'll tell you, I speak with just as many young people who want to get involved, but really don't know how or where their options are, or frankly are overwhelmed by the number of solutions and statistics that are kind of being thrown out there as part of this conversation. So to those young people, I definitely say to look to their schools. It's not only diesel buses, but a number of different policies that allow our schools to kind of contribute to and exacerbate this climate crisis. And young people should demand a seat at the table. You know, at the Student Voice team, we say that young people are the most important stakeholders in school, mostly because they're spending 35 hours a week in the classroom, and they have the most to lose when things in that classroom aren't working for them, or in the case of diesel buses, are literally poisoning them. And so I think it's quite important that we are working to support young people to be in those decision-making positions, and insisting that education decision makers prioritize the climate emergency when it comes to policy. And then one more piece I want to say to this, particularly when it comes to families, is just to speak to not only the research, but my own experience in that young people can be quite compelling messengers when it comes to reaching their parents and their families. And so as we're thinking about how to build a coalition that can support this work, we should be partnering with young people so that we can reach their families and people in their networks as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There's a lot of talk about intergenerational partnership between young people and adults, and I just want to posit that intergenerational learning is a great opportunity to be continuing to build support and awareness about the harmful effects of diesel buses.
Well, that's great, and appreciate that approach to it. I wouldn't blame you for having a much more of a, like, you old guys screwed this up and get out of the way so we can take over approach. But definitely the voices of young people have been absolutely critical over the last few years in raising the ambition to tackle the climate crisis one way or the other. So really important work. So we're running out of time, but I want to give everybody a chance to just talk about what you think is the kind of most important measures that need to be taken right now to advance this agenda so that we can make this transition to clean commute for kids, for everybody, and get the benefits of a completely clean school bus fleet. Let me take it in the opposite order that I started. So Gil, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. I think the answer to it obviously is funding. I think it's very important that we have the money to back what things that we're trying to do. I think we should take success stories like Stockton Unified and analyze all the things that worked right, and then definitely look at how we make models for throughout the country. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on the fact that with a $5 million investment, we've gone from 0 chargers in design to having 24 chargers installed and 4 buses or 11 buses coming in March in less than 1 year. So that's what I'm excited about. I think that it is important because this is for our kids. It's about the emissions around them and making a safe environment and making it a good thing that they can tell the story with. I think it's important to get the students involved. So that's why we've done the Energy Patrol videos. I think that's what sets us apart too, is letting kids tell the story because it's about them and for them. Why not include them? So I'm very excited about it. But I encourage all the states, a lot of people say they don't have the grant or investment money. I think it's coming and I think we need to be prepared. So I'm excited about it and we'd be happy to help any way we can. And please share our videos online because we'd appreciate the support. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Gil. Richard, to you.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. So the federal work that you just mentioned is extremely important. We think, the federal and state governments play a big role in catalyzing this change. And we'd love to see it happen in a programmatic way that can lead to a sustainable full electrification of the U.S. school buses. And so we think that is really important. The other thing that's really important is that school districts and end users know that there are innovative third-party models available. Once a school district has a genuine desire to electrify its fleet, and in many cases it's tried to do so, they look at some of the grant programs out there that provide funding, but not always the education and information needed to overcome the tactical challenges of electrifying and switching a fleet. And so the third-party model that Highland is developing solves those problems for a district and can do so with a little bit of grant funding up front, but a much more sustainable programmatic way to electrify. And so education is really important, and awareness of different and new innovative models that are out there. So I'd say those are probably two of the most important things that we think about.
Great, thank you. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, it sounds like an important first step is to get Richard and his team to come to Kentucky. But, to be honest, I'm thinking back to something I read earlier today, which is that there is no known safe level of exposure to diesel exhaust for children, especially those with respiratory illness, especially those in elementary school. As Gil and Catherine pointed out, the impacts of the poisonous diesel exhaust, like COVID-19, disproportionately impacts communities of color and folks in our rural communities. And so this should be an imperative for decision makers. What should be disturbing to all of us is the role that our public schools are continuing to play in perpetuating this health disparity by purchasing new diesel buses. So in terms of what's most important right now, there should be no more new diesel buses being purchased by school districts, and they should be taking seriously what it means to transition their fleet for both student health and subsequently academic achievement. So I just wanted to elevate those points from Gil and Catherine again as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, once a bus is purchased, it's going to be on the road for a decade or more. And so getting those decisions right up front is so critical. All right, Catherine, let's finish up with you.
Thank you. Well, it's hard to follow Gil, Richard, and Andrew because they've said it all. And, Andrew, thank you for really conveying the urgency there, that there is no time to waste. And we really need to have the next school bus. Every school bus that is purchased next has to be electric. I'll just reiterate some priorities for the Sierra Club, which is accelerating the transition, we need to ensure that the investments will benefit the school districts that need it most. I know it's been said already, but the low-income communities and communities of color that feel the effects of the worst air pollution should be the first in line for receiving the investments for electric school buses. And we want to make sure that electric school buses means good paying union jobs in the United States. And this will make the transition a win-win, not only for the students and bus operators, but also for the workers that are manufacturing the buses as well. And I'm so grateful for President Biden and Vice President Harris for having identified electric school buses as a priority. And with that level of commitment, I know we can make this transition a reality.
Thank you. And I want to thank the panel. With this kind of expertise and passion displayed on this panel, I think we're going to get this done. I think we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to get the kind of investment from the federal government, which will certainly facilitate that, but also the demand from the district level and then solutions providers to come in and really make this all possible. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to working together to make this happen.
Thank you for having us.